Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 12. I'm Art Regner, along with Kevin Allen, the Hockey Hall of Fame writer from USA Today. And, of course, we're talking the Red Wings. Red Wings had two big games this week thus far, Tuesday against Ottawa and last night, Thursday, against the Boston Bruins. A total of 4 points on the board. Detroit gets one. However, remember, that was a three-point game. So Red Wings now find themselves essentially tied with the Bruins. They're still third in the Atlantic Division because they have a game at hand of the Boston Bruins. And the Ottawa Senators, who won in overtime last night at home against the Tampa Bay Lightning, are now only three behind Detroit. Detroit has 5 games left. Ottawa has 5 games left. And the Boston Bruins only have 4 games left, as I said. And don't forget about the Florida Panthers, because they seem to be making a little bit of a run as well. So let's bring in Kevin Allen. And Kevin, first of all, I read a statistic today. The Red Wings were up 1-0 going into the third. They scored a power play goal. We're up 2-0, and I know a 2-0 lead is the worst to have in hockey. But then I read that this was the first time Boston has come back when they trailed by multiple goals in the third period since 2011. I don't know if it was a meltdown or if the Red Wings have had a collective meltdown since their 6-game road trip where they were so successful, but if you weren't worried about the Detroit Red Wings and their 24 consecutive playoff streak, 24 consecutive seasons before, I am under the impression you've got to be at least a little bit concerned right now.
Well, Art, I think you do have to be concerned, just simply because if you look at the teams that are in competition with the Red Wings, mainly the Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators, they're both playing at a high level, and the Red Wings, are trying to find their game. And here we are down to the final, 10 days of the season, and I know Mike Babcock has to be frustrated. That game seemed in hand, and not only has it been a long time since the Bruins have, come from behind in a third period, but the Red Wings had not lost a game in regulation this season. When they led going into the third period, they had gotten 4 points, I think, in 4 of those games, but in 31 games where they had the lead, I think they won 27 times, or numbers that are very similar to that. So it was a very costly loss. If you're Mrazek, I'm sure. That was a disastrous result for him personally, and having that goal sort of leak through him. And when that's been a problem for Jimmy Howard in the slump, and to have Mrazek do that, who had played well obviously up until that point, I think it probably planted some self-doubt in the Red Wings as well. I heard Henrik Zetterberg say, well, this is nothing new to us. The last couple of seasons we've had to make a final late season push, but last season it was all positive, coming down the stretch, and I think now what we have is some negativity sort of creeping in. I wonder whether or not the goaltending is strong enough. I wonder whether the defense is strong enough. I wonder whether or not they can dial up and get a key goal when they need it. I mean, really, their offense has been fine. It's certainly ranked among the top 10 in the NHL in terms of goals, average goals per game. But can they get that goal when they need it? I mean, I think that's the least of their problems. But when you're in this kind of slump, you start to wonder about every aspect of your game.
Well, you certainly do, and Mike Babcock. Let's go right into the goaltending issue again. Mrazek played very well. He played very well against Ottawa. Gave up a goal with 3 minutes to go in the third period or something like that, and the Senators tied it up and won it in a shootout. And then with 2 minutes and some odd seconds left, the guy, I'm not going to diss the young man because he scored his first goal in the NHL. Congratulations to him. But guy I never heard of before suddenly comes out of nowhere and scores that goal. After the game, Mike Babcock indicated to the media at that time that he thought Mrazek was going to go Saturday night against the Wild in Minnesota. That has since changed, and Jimmy Howard has been announced as the starting goaltender. The game is a 7 o'clock game or 7:30 game in Minneapolis, and that is Eastern Daylight Time, and that's the start. And then at 5 o'clock on Easter Sunday, the Red Wings host the Washington Capitals. So are you surprised that Howard's going, or do you think because of the way Mrazek let in that goal, it's Mike Babcock's trying to find a goalie, and whomever is the hot goalie is, or he gave Mrazek the opportunity to play himself out of the terrible game against the Islanders?
Yeah, he did. He's also said, though, that the Mrazek's going to go on Sunday, I believe. So, and then when asked and pressed to why he's making that decision, he said, we haven't had good luck with goalies playing back-to-back games this season. So, I mean, I think Babcock is pulling every lever trying to figure out the proper way to play as goalies down the stretch. And I think there are two elements here, two layers of this. First of all, he's got to figure out a way to get this team in the playoffs. And once that happens, then he can make a determination of which goalie is going to play in the playoffs if they do indeed, get there. But at this point, Howard was your starting goalie at the start of the season. He was your goalie of the future, even though Mrazek was pressing him. He played well early on. He's struggled since he's come back from the injury, so it makes sense to go back to him. The sort of accepted strategy in NHL is to go with the hot goalie. And when that fails, you basically, a goalie plays his way out of a position, and then new guy is brought in. In other words, in the 70s and in the 80s, you heard it all the time saying, our goalie will play until he loses, and then the other guy will go in. And I think it's almost as if the Red Wings are in that situation now. The guy plays until he doesn't play well or gives up a costly goal, and then we'll try the other guy. But, this is certainly not a place where the Red Wings thought they were going to be. They thought they had two really strong goaltenders, even a month ago. I mean, it looked like they had two really good options. They had Jimmy Howard, who had played well. This is a guy that made the Olympic team in 2014. They signed him to a long-term deal because they believed he was the guy. And then they had Mrazek, who, around the NHL is considered one of the best young prospects, in the American Hockey League, and now the best younger players in the NHL. And I think there'd be a lot of teams that would like to have him as their, backup goalie, their apprentice goalie, the guy who's sort of waiting in the wings. So, it seems like the Red Wings have good options, but neither of those goalies has managed to, grab the opportunity given to him and run with it. Even though Mrazek has looked strong at times, he has given up the goals that make you go, if you're a Red Wings fan.
Well, let me ask you, because is it too late for the Monster now? I mean, only 5 games left, and the Red Wings have always said they've never had any disparaging words about the Monster at all, or Jonas Gustafsson. They say we like him. It's just that he's not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think if we have failure on both goalies this weekend, I think it would have to be an option, to be honest. I think they'll be looking for one of these guys to play really, really well over the weekend. And, that's the other element, too. In these two games and back-to-back gives the opportunity to see both guys again. And maybe Babcock's thinking, hey, look, I'll watch him again. And on Monday morning, whoever has played the best on the weekend, that's who we're going to have going forward. Maybe that's his thinking because, and you bring it up all the time, but it's so important. He always says, I don't determine playing time. They determine it with their level of play. And in this case, with the way the goaltenders are going, I mean, that's clearly the case. Like the guy that plays well over the weekend is going to play next week. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Kyle Quincy has not been a favorite among Red Wing fans for a couple of seasons now, and I think, much to not fair to Kyle, but he was traded for a #1 draft pick, and everyone thinks that Stevie Yzerman fleets the Red Wings on that one. But Red Wings get that 2-0 lead, and then immediately afterwards he gets a penalty. He takes a penalty, and Boston scores. Of course, after the game, that penalty, him taking that penalty, was really talked about on quote-unquote social media. And also the fact is that we've talked about the Red Wings have never really been too much of a national story. We talked about that in the Red and White Authority in episode 11. Now all of a sudden everyone's coming out and saying, well, we kind of thought that they were overachieving, and now we're kind of seeing the real Red Wing team. And I'm looking at it, even though Riley Sheahan came back last night and played, I thought, reasonably well, the fact of the matter is, and he's been really getting knocked lately, almost knocked like he did when he played for Russia in the Olympics last year and then couldn't play for the Red Wings, that Pavel Datsyuk is now getting a reputation of being a soft player. I think that that's unfair. I don't think Pavel Datsyuk's a soft player. It is bad coincidence, I guess, that he seems to get hurt all the time at this time of year. but lo and behold, in these 5 games, and he said he's going to go in Minnesota, but the Red Wings need Pavel Datsyuk, maybe even more so than they need a good performance in net.
Well, I think they need them both. They're not going anywhere if they don't have quality goaltending. So we'll have to start there. But your point is well taken. Datsyuk he has always been sort of the engine that drives this team, and they need his ability to score the big goal. He's among the he is leading the NHL. I think in late third period points, or if he's not leading, he's among the leaders. When the game's on the line, he always has been able to rise up. And I think it is unfair to say that when the going gets tough, he gets hurt. I think this is simply a reflection of what happens when you get older. And when you get older, players always get nagging injuries in the NHL in an 82-game season, but your ability to sort of play through those and recover quickly, I think, diminishes with age. I mean, I think that happens with a lot of guys, and I think, he wants to be right, and I think the Red Wings want him to be right, and I think they want him to be healed. So I think he's just trying to be able to come back and play at a level in which he can be a dominant player. I mean, it doesn't help the team for him to come back and just be on the ice if he can't do anything, when it also potentially damages his ability to heal and come back and be a top player. So I just would not accept the argument that he's a soft player. He's never shown any inclination to be that type of player. I mean, in the Olympics, when you watched him up close, as I did, he was playing on one horrible knee, and I just think he felt like he should do it for his country, but you could tell it was troublesome for him to be out there.
Well, it was troublesome for him to be out there, and if you really look at it, out of all the Russian players, and granted, there was in Sochi in the Olympics, there was a lot of pressure on the Russian national team, but he was by far their best player, and one of the best players in that tournament. I believe again, one thing is that Pavel Datsyuk scores the big goal. I think last show I said that the Red Wings were swept by Boston. They actually lost in 5. Datsyuk scored a goal with about 2 minutes left in Game 1, and Detroit won, I believe, 1-0. So he is valuable. Kevin, that statistic, he is in the top 3 in the NHL in game-winning goals scored in the third period, and also game-winning goals scored in overtime. So he's among the league leaders, which says a lot. But also where they're missing him is that, and this might be an underrated or a thing we just don't notice, is that he's terrific in the face-off circle.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
They have not been winning a lot of draws except for Joachim Andersen, who has probably played 2 of his best games as a Red Wing, even though he might not be on the score sheet, because he is winning. And, I mean, he's just dominating the face-off circle. And, obviously, for the Red Wings to work themselves out of this, they have to possess the puck. And if they're going around chasing like they did against Ottawa, they're not going to win many hockey games, even though after this weekend, 2 of the remaining 3 games, they have the Montreal Canadiens and Montreal sandwiched around Carolina at home on Tuesday, and then Carolina on the road next Saturday. So, and people are looking at that thinking, well, geez, Carolina is that's the schedule maker being kind. But the Hurricanes have been playing pretty well as of late. And whenever you're playing a team that really is playing for jobs for next year or contracts, or not just playing because they don't, they love for the love of the game, they don't have anything really riding on it, I don't know if those are teams you want to face at the end of the season.
Well, for sure. I was just looking at some puck possession statistics yesterday on the NHL, website, and the number 1 puck possession forward in the league right now is Thomas Tatar. That measured on number of shots attempted versus number of shots against your team while you're on the ice. He was the number 1 forward. He's like plus 351. But Pavel Datsyuk is in the top 15 players. But 2 players who are also on that list, talking about Carolina, are Eric Stahl, who is on that list, and then I'm trying to think of the other, but there's another member of the Carolina Hurricanes that is on that. Justin Falk, that's who it is. Justin Falk is also on that list. So, even though the Carolina Hurricanes had a disastrous start, if you look at them after Stahl came back from injury, Eric Stahl, they've been, one of the better teams. Their record is much better than it was before when he was injured, and now, Jordan Stahl is back. They're just a much more effective team. So they don't really have an easy schedule. Like Minnesota has been one of the best teams in the league. In fact, they're my sleeper for the Stanley Cup playoffs. I keep being asked, okay, where's the one team no one's talking about? To me, it's the Minnesota Wild. Like, you look at their roster and compare it to the Montreal Canadiens, who've had an exceptional season. The Minnesota Wild roster is better and has more talent, in my opinion, than the Montreal roster. And their goaltending, sure, Carey Price is having an MVP season. He has been better than Dubnyk. But Dubnyk, in my mind, is a Vezina Trophy finalist as well. So that Minnesota team is a very, very, very good team. And I think the schedule the Red Wings have, that's why I think they really are in jeopardy of missing the playoffs, because Boston and Ottawa are playing well, and the Red Wings haven't found their game. And I think their schedule is tough, because I think Carolina's tough. I think Minnesota's tough. I think the Capitals are, under Barry Trotz, are a much improved team. There's not going to be any easy games for the Red Wings for them to make the playoffs here.
Kevin, let me. I don't know if it was frustrating. You could see it on Nicholas Cromwell's face after the game last night. He was completely upset, and and for the last couple of seasons, he's been saying, we got to play a full 60. We've got to play a full 60. We're not playing a complete game. Even a couple of mistakes cost us. They're always in the back of our net, and he's not blaming the goaltender as much as he's, I think at times he's blaming defensive coverage and zone coverage. But with that said, last night Mike Babcock said it again. Henrik Zetterberg said it. We've done a lot. We're doing a lot of good things. We're doing a lot of good things. We're doing a lot of, and they are. And I guess it's frustrating when you're not picking up 2 points when you're doing a lot of good things. Yet that's all we hear over and over and over, is that we're doing a lot of good things and it's not translating. So let me ask you this question, Kevin. What happened last night when they had that 2-0 lead? Was it Quincy's penalty and Boston capitalized very, very quickly and got a power play goal to make it 2-1? How can a team that's doing a lot of good things, a team that has veteran leadership like the Detroit Red Wings, a coach that is considered to be the best coach in all of hockey, perhaps not only the NHL but the entire world, why is this team stumbling right now, even though after games they're at a loss for words about what's going on as well?
Well, I think self-doubt has crept in. I don't think there's any question about that. They had the lead. There was the penalty that everybody was talking about on Twitter. That's obviously an ill-advised penalty at that point in time. You're trying to hold the lead, to play simple hockey, simple defensive hockey, and you get that penalty, and it ends up being a goal. But I think as soon as that goal scored, I think everybody in Detroit felt, uh-oh, because they have watched this team. And I think if the fans were feeling that way, I think the players were feeling that way. They'll say they weren't, but, and you think, okay, they're pro players. But, we've all watched enough sports to know that that's the number one issue usually with a team is, they've got to feel good about themselves. They've got to feel confident. They have to feel as if they're going to be successful. The best teams are the teams, particularly in the playoffs. We see this all the time. There are teams, momentum teams in the playoffs, who they show up at the rink every day. They expect to win because they know they're playing well. Like Calgary Flames this season is a great example of that. They have won a lot of games in the third period. So when they're down, they just expect to be able to come back. Right, and right. I think right now the Red Wings are in that period when they don't quite know where their goaltending is going to be. They know their defense has sagged at times this season. Their offense has been a little more consistent. So I think they don't have that same level of confidence. Their issues are not dissimilar to what I said about Jimmy Howard. Like, I just don't know that they are the same confident team. And the other thing, too, is I think we're a little bit guilty of sort of overestimating this team. This is not the Red Wings of the 1990s when, you had a grind line of, McCarty and Draper and Maltby that, should have been role players, but, oftentimes could have been a number one line with the impact they were having at a game. The Red Wings are not as deep since the salary cap was introduced as they've been in the past. So, when they lose top players like Datsuk, and when a guy like Riley Sheehan is coming back from injury, they're just not the same team, and they've got to dig deep, and they've got to be a confident team in order to be successful. And right now, I just don't think they're a confident team.
How do they turn it around?
Well, I mean, I think they have to just, they've done it for, like yesterday. I thought they played a fine game for, more than 40 minutes, and they just have to continue on playing that simple style, and tighten up defensively, get the puck out of their zone, And the other thing is, and Babcock says this all the time, so much so that I think it becomes, people laugh when they hear about it, but it's so true. They got to keep the throttle down. You got to keep pressing and moving forward. And I think there is a tendency to, when you have a 2-0 lead, to kind of sit back. And when the Red Wings do that, they allow the other team to possess the puck in their end. And I think they got to push forward. It's get the puck out of their zone, get it up to the forwards, and let Nyquist and Tatar and Helm do the magic that they have.
Well, I mean, I find it interesting too. It does seem to be like a lack of confidence, or because they haven't been able. It seems like they haven't won back-to-back games in an eternity, and it seems as soon as something goes wrong, and it's like it's human nature, especially from fans. They're thinking, oh no, the sky's going to fall. Okay. But you're right. Their body language just isn't good at this point from everyone down. Even when Henrik Zetterberg, and God bless him, when he's talking about, well, we've been down this road, and and really showing true leadership, I think, by not trying to press the panic button, but you can just tell, he's saying it. I think he believes it to a certain extent, but yet he's still worried, but he's not going to let us know. And I think last night, Mike Babcock, and granted, he had just, the day before he was in Saskatoon burying his father. So he came back and he looked a little bit lost last night as well. I mean, he thought that they were doing good things. I know he got a little bit defensive after the Ottawa game about people asking negative questions, but you're only asking, and Kevin, you know this as well as anybody, you only ask questions based on what's going on with the team. And if the questions appear to be negative, they're being negative because they're not winning. And you're asking, why aren't you winning? And I think when you start to lose, and, we've covered the Lions long enough to know that, the Red Wings hate losing. They always have hated losing. You go into certain locker rooms and guys kind of accept it. I'm not going to name teams that kind of accept it, but they're not as angry or upset. The Red Wings, Cromwell was upset. And I'm not, but they just seem to be confused right now. Very, very confused about why this is happening, considering, and maybe it's because, Kevin, we overestimated them, they overestimated themselves, that they had, we were looking at, hey, could they be number one in the Atlantic Division? I mean, it was only a few weeks ago where you're thinking, geez, this team's better than we thought, and they've exceeded expectations. Could they be number one? And now all of a sudden, when nothing seems to be going right, I'm almost worried that emotionally, and from a standpoint of trying to come together as a team, do they have enough resiliency left? After the way they played against Ottawa, I didn't think they did. I really didn't. But then last night against Boston, I'm thinking, okay, just much like Pittsburgh after they were shut out, or you're not shut out, but they were drilled by the Flyers on Saturday, they seem to put it together, and I don't know how many times they can go back to that well. I don't know if that, to be completely cliche-ish here, if that well's dry now for this team. I mean, I'm very, very worried.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at it like this, if you compare the rosters of the Tampa Bay Lightning right now and the Detroit Red Wings, the Red Wings are not as talented or as polished as the Tampa Bay Lightning. But could they beat the Lightning in a playoff series? I think they could.
Right.
But they've got to be playing at a high level. And the same is true as Montreal. I mean, I like Carey Price. I think he's the best goalie in the league right now. And, I think that gives the Montreal Canadiens a distinct advantage. I think they're a better team. They've been more consistent with the Red Wings. They played better defensively this season, than the Red Wings. But could the Red Wings beat them in a playoff series? I believe they could. I think they're close enough; they're within striking distance, but they have to be playing at a high level. They have to have momentum on their side. They have to be confident in their own abilities, and they're not doing that. And one of the things that could really help them is always in these situations, you need a flag carrier to step up. And I know the natural thought from fans is we need that guy to be Datsuk, but it could really be anyone. I mean, if they could get a huge game out of Darren Helm or a huge game out of Tatar or Nyquist, where they're such a dominant player that what you remember about their performance in that game is what they did, and they haven't had that in a while. I mean, when can we remember one guy kind of stepping up and having that big game? So when all this is going on, when they have the self-doubt, when they're struggling defensively, when their goaltending hasn't been sharp, you need somebody to sort of pick the team up, a stopper. Hockey's a version of a stopper. So, maybe that's what they need right now, too. They need a good, solid 60-minute game out of their goalie. They need to play a safe, defensive, conservative game, and they also need someone to step up and have a big, offensive game to be memorable. I mean, let's not forget in all this that during all this troublesome time, and they've really played poorly, inferior hockey by their standards. They've had a big win over Tampa Bay, a team that I like a lot, and a big win over the St. Louis Blues, who, in my mind, are a contender in the the Western Conference. So it's not like this is a disastrous team. This is a team that is just struggling and really just can't figure out how to be successful.
No, they certainly can't. Kevin, I was obviously listening to you. I'm always captivated when you speak by what you're saying. But I've got the old phone out here, and I'm looking, and I want to go through the teams that the Red Wings are most in competition with for this playoff spot. And I've got Boston's remaining schedule. Their remaining 4 games. Tomorrow night, April 4th, they host the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's their last. That's their last game of the home game of the year. Then they're on the road for 3. They're at Washington on April 8th. Then the next day, on April 9th, they're against the Florida Panthers, who are still have a shot at this, believe it or not. And then they close out the season on the road against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Boston has not been a great road team this year. I know they came back last night, but remember, it's the first time they were trailed by multiple goals that they've come back in a hockey game and won it, trailing in the third period since 2011. But except for Toronto, because we know that the Leafs, gosh, only knows what they're going to do. Who knows? I guess they could surprise us and actually turn into a hockey club for one night. But aside from that, Capitals, Panthers, Lightning, they're playing 3 teams on the road, all 3 of whom have something to play for.
Yeah. No, I mean that's that is you got to put the W in the column when they play the Maple Leafs. I just don't see the Maple Leafs beating them. But those other games are all going to be tough games. Absolutely. And as you said, all of those teams are in the race. They got something that they're battling for. So out of those 4 games, could they get 6 points? Yeah, I don't see them getting 8 though. Not with that competition. Probably the over and under would be 4 on that. Where you'd probably win one of those 3 games, but maybe they'd get a point. Maybe they 5. Maybe 5 is what they're going to get out of those 8.
Well, yeah, because the tough one is that they play back to back. They're in Washington, and then they have to hop a plane and go down to Florida and go down to Miami and play the Panthers. And then they got a couple of days off, or they got actually a day to recoup in the sun and fun in Florida, and then they close out against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they get 5 points. Let's look at the Red Wings now again, and let's hone in on this weekend. I know that you said you thought that they needed at least 2 out of the last 4.
Yeah.
They only got a point.
Yeah.
They've got 4 points up. And I guess against Minnesota, it doesn't matter if it's a 2 or 3 point game, I would imagine, as long as they get at least 1 point. But is it crucial?
I think if they get 1 out of Minnesota, you got to be happy. I mean, Minnesota's playing, fine hockey. So, I think you hope if you're a Red Wings fan, you got to hope for 3 points out of this weekend.
3 points, and you've got to win your home game, right, on Easter Sunday. That's
I mean. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's just it. I'm bringing up the Ottawa Senators schedule here, and we'll see exactly fifth in the Atlantic Division, and let's see. They host the Capitals. Well, they host Washington tomorrow, and then they're at Toronto. They play back-to-back on Sunday and Monday. They host the Capitals tomorrow, and then on Easter Sunday they play. They're at Toronto. Then they host Pittsburgh on the 7th, and then on the 9th they're at the Rangers, and then they're at the Flyers on the 11th. So, I mean, they're playing a few teams there, and some of these games are on the road. And the Rangers could, if they wanted the President's Trophy or whatever, they could be playing for that. But really, in the long run, if you look at it, they have Capitals, Maple Leafs, Penguins, Rangers, Flyers. Not easy, but not all that difficult either, considering the way they're playing.
Yeah, to me that seems like at least 6 points. Like the Penguins are struggling like the Red Wings, in my opinion. I mean, they have not had their team together the entire season. To lose Pascal Dupuis and Mata, who are two very important players for them. And then, Crosby and Malkin have been in and out of the lineup with issues as well, mostly Malkin, who's been hurt. And, they've struggled. They've never really sort of sorted out their new system under, Johnston as their new coach, replacing Bosma last summer. So, I see that they'll beat the Penguins. And, the Flyers have been a real up and down team. I think they're a better team than they've shown, but I still don't think that they're a team that should give them much competition at the end of the season with nothing to play for. So I would assume they would get at least 6 points.
Okay, they get 6 points. They get 6, and they're behind the Red Wings by 3, I would imagine, right? They're 3, and they're tied with Boston. Now this is Florida's schedule, and maybe they could work out as a spoiler as well. They're at home now. Beginning last night with the Hurricanes, whom they beat 6-1. They close out the season. Saturday they host Tampa Bay. That's going to be a big game. They host Montreal the next day on the 5th. Then they host Boston on the 9th, and then on the 11th they host the New Jersey Devils, who aren't going anywhere. So Florida, I mean, they're at home, which is good, and they're a pretty good home team, but that's a pretty daunting schedule for them. I guess if you're a Wings fan, you're hoping that they beat the Lightning, Canadiens, and Bruins, at home, and take something from there, and even that they don't make the playoffs, at least they can help the Red Wings' cause.
Well, absolutely. I've got a little Easter week chaos in my house here, but with my grandkids. But
that's all right.
Yeah, with that schedule, I just don't see the Panthers doing like that. They've hung in there. They've been like the team on the edge of the cliff that's held on. And I give Dale Talon full marks. But the other night they had Boston on the ropes, and Luongo gave up a couple of softies, and I thought that was really difficult. Now they haven't caved in; they've still hung in there, and I think if you're a hockey fan, you have to sort of root for the Panthers, because this is a team who really needs to get in the playoffs. It's they've only made it once in over a dozen years, and they need to start establishing a fan base there. It's been a little long enough down there, so. They need to get in, but I just don't see that they've improved under Gerard Gallant defensively, but they haven't really put together an offense that makes them as dangerous as they need to be. So I don't think that they're going to be a factor in this.
Well, I agree with you. Again, they could be a spoiler. So then let's look at this for what it's worth. We've just gone through the schedule, Boston, Ottawa, and, of course, the Panthers. We're going to give them a little bit of respect here, but we don't think they're going to make it. Now we know what the Red Wings schedule is, as we said. Minnesota tomorrow night in Minnesota. They host the Washington Capitals Sunday. Tuesday, it's their last home game of the year, hosting the Carolina Hurricanes. Then on Thursday, they're on the road at Montreal, a team that has given them fits all season long. They have not done well in the form as of late, they being the Detroit Red Wings. Historically, the Red Wings haven't done too well in Montreal. And then they close out the season at Carolina. And I know from watching the Red Wings play in Carolina, there's usually a lot of Red Wing fans down in Carolina, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So they might have a building that's half and half, if that means anything. But How many points do the Red Wings need? How many points do they need to ensure that they get a playoff? If, let's say, if Ottawa gets 6 and Detroit is 3 ahead of them, then you would have to think that at this point Detroit needs 4 points somewhere down the road. Is this team capable of getting 4 points in their last 5 games?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, I think they close them out with 5 or 6 points. I've sort of felt that if they could get 5 or 6 points, then I think they will. They're going to get in the playoffs some way, shape, or form. And I think it's still possible they could win 2 games and still do it because there'll be pressure. But I think you really want to get 5 or 6, and I think if you do that, that's just so much pressure on Ottawa to win all their games otherwise. So that's the key. And even though it's a tough schedule for the Red Wings, I mean they can get those points. Like any of those teams, they can squeeze one out. That's the beauty of this system. Not everybody loves the logic of the 3-point games versus the 2-point games, and it would make more sense. But this is for another day to go 3 for a regulation win and then 2-1 if you go to the postseason. But that's not the way we do it. So because of that 3-point game, I think it gives the Red Wings, who are struggling a little bit, the opportunity. If they can just hang on and get some 1-pointers in addition to a couple of wins, I think they're going to get in the playoffs. And to be honest with you, I don't even think it really matters where they get in the playoffs. I really don't. I think as I mentioned before, I think Montreal and Tampa Bay are better teams than the Red Wings right now, but they're capable of beating them. I don't think they beat them. And if they played a 7-game series 10 times, maybe they'd only beat them 3 times or twice even. But they're capable. If it's the right time and they get on and are playing strong hockey, they can do it. So I personally don't think it matters whether they play Montreal or Tampa Bay. I think they have an opportunity. Montreal's offense is 24th in the league. So if you get some goals against Carey, and your goaltending is just solid, you can win that series. You really can. And Tampa Bay, even though they've had troubles with Tampa Bay, they did beat them the last time. And Bishop has never played a playoff game. So I think the key for the Red Wings is to concentrate and just say, look, it doesn't matter how we get in. You get in, and you got a shot. This isn't the NBA where the lower seeds have trouble. This is the NHL where lower seeds do really, really well. So I don't think it matters, and I think if they get to get 5 points, I think they're going to close out Ottawa, and then they're going to be in.
Kevin, let's have a little fun here, and then we'll get back to a more serious discussion. If the Red Wings don't make the playoffs, what percentage chance do they have? Because I know you're the man with all the numbers. You've been breaking it down. Can they get Connor McDavid or Jack?
Yeah, I mean, they could, and it's not very high. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's just a fraction of. It'd be like a 1 or 2 or 3% or whatever it would be because they would barely miss the playoffs. But sure, can you imagine a 1-2 combination of Connor McDavid and Dylan Larkin? As your top 2 centers, like holy cow! And here's the thing, and I keep saying this all the time. The sweepstakes that everybody's talking about, they call it the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. You're playing for Jack Eichel,
right?
Because the last place team is only has a 20% chance of winning the lottery now, the way it works out. So you're getting Eichel, okay? If you have the worst record because you can't fall lower than second. And I just really feel that the way this is working out, that one of these teams, like it's not going to be Edmonton or Buffalo or Arizona or even Toronto getting Connor McDavid. It's going to be one of those teams. It's going to be like New Jersey or Florida or one of the teams that have just sort of missed. The bottom 5 teams have as good a chance of getting it as Buffalo when you add all their odds together. So what the heck? If they miss it, who knows? They might have a shot at it.
Well, if the Red Wings don't make the playoffs and they somehow end up with Connor McDavid, of course Brendan Shanahan's going to be blamed somehow. I'm sure of that.
Well, I guarantee you, if those balls fall out and the Toronto Maple Leafs end up with Connor McDavid, there's going to be a federal investigation over this whole thing. I mean, it'll be, like everybody will look at this as if it's the fix is in. That's for sure.
Right? Can you imagine the Buffalo fans if that were to happen? With If Toronto were to get Connor McDavid, man, I mean, they're so close to one another. Those two cities, that would be incredible. That would definitely be incredible. But I guess we'll have to see.
Well, I just feel like it's going to happen. Like I just don't see the Buffalo Sabres getting called, or the Arizona, Coyotes. I think it's going to be one of those other teams.
Were you surprised that the league went to this kind of slanted? Because every year Edmonton kept getting the number one pick and I don't know if they kept screwing it up. They just kept drafting the same player over and over and over and over again. I mean, did they feel we have to do something to save them ourselves?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I kind of feel like they should have gone to the system we're going to have next year, where the top 3 picks are going to be determined by the draw. So, in other words, if we had the system we're going to have this year, then the Buffalo Sabres could pick as low as 4th, because the lottery would determine who would pick 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So the lottery would determine who would get Eichel as well as McDavid, and then even Dylan Strome, who's a big center who's really developed, who's Ryan Strome's brother, or Noah Hannafin, who's at Boston University, who's on the U.S. development program. One of those 2 guys is going to go number 3, and that's the way it would be determined. And to be honest with you, that's a fair system. My problem with the whole tanking debate is not with Buffalo's decision to strip their team down to the chassis and rebuild. That happens all the time. That's an effective strategy. That's what you do when you're bottoming out. The problem I had is it became so apparent when they kept, they had 2 goalies who were playing well and they traded them both. To me, that's going above and beyond. Like that's, you can't do that. I'm okay with you saying, okay, we're rebuilding, and it's not the players. Like, that's the only thing I hate about the word tanking, is it implies the players are involved. Players never involved in this. And that's proven because, Buffalo won a game the other night they shouldn't have won. But they won it because the players have a lot of pride. And, they're playing to win every night. Ted Nolan's trying to win every night. Because, and it's not even in their best interest to help bring in Connor McDavid, because one of them is going to be out of work, so when he shows up. So, that's why I'm troubled by Buffalo. But it's not the fact they put themselves in a position at the start of the season, because the Arizona Coyotes. This is an accident. The Coyotes thought they were going to get in the playoffs this year.
Right, they did.
And then, and they didn't set their team up to go for it. But when they got close enough, they traded away some of their players. To me, that's what everybody does. But not everybody, because they got a hot goalie, says, "Well, I better trade him," and then do it twice. So.
What did you think? And we were going to talk about this. I don't know if it was last show or the show before. Then I completely got caught up in something else and I forgot about it. I know we talked about it. What do you think about the Buffalo fans actually cheering for the Arizona Coyotes? In Buffalo, because they wanted their team to lose. I mean, I guess it's the system just is not the system. That's a part of the system, I guess, for lack of a better term, that blows at times.
Well, what I would say is, if we had next year's system in place, they couldn't do that. And I think that, because, the optics of that are bad. It just looks bad. And I didn't, Weber, the Buffalo defenseman, was a little upset, and I don't blame him. These are your fans. You're not part of this plot to get the top player. You're a player. You're out there. You're working hard. You're doing, you can't help it that the guys surrounding you are not talented enough to get the job done. So, you're doing what you can, and your fans are acting that way. And, the one thing about the Sabres you can say is they've never lacked effort. Like, it would be one thing, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the way they've performed, it really looks like the players are not performing at a high level. They seem demoralized. That's not the case in Buffalo. The players have actually, in my opinion, worked hard. I mean, they had that run where they were really good for about 3 weeks, and their goaltenders were good every night. That's why they traded them. So I think I'm a little bit troubled by that. I understand it, and I think if you think about it logically, what you have to say is, look, those people pay money. They ought to be able to act any way they want to act, and that's probably where the conclusion I would reach if I thought about it deeply. But I can understand why the players are troubled by it.
let's go back to the Red Wings. And Kevin, I'm at the point now that regardless if they make the playoffs or not, and if in case you're just joining us here on the Red and White Authority episode number 12, somehow I still think they're going to make it. Kevin, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think somehow they're going to sneak in or whatever. It's going to be. It shouldn't have come down to this, but it has come down to this, and the Red Wings are somehow going to make it. With that said, because of the way that they have kind of maybe even you could say backed into this, because they had a substantial lead before the bottom started to fall out in March, that I'm under the impression now that the Red Wings are going to do some tinkering to this lineup. I think they've looked at their defense. I think their defense, which was impressive in the beginning, and the team defense, but they've got to shore up that blue line somehow. They've got to, Nicholas Cromwell is a fine defenseman, but after Nicholas Cromwell, it really does seem to go down significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that because I think when you watch what has happened with this team late in the season, the goaltending was one issue, but I've said all along that the issue has primarily been a defensive issue as well. It's been in harmony. So I think with Marchenko available and the way he plays, I think he played sort of the kind of safe style that they really have needed down the stretch here. And I wonder, even though he's a young player, I wondered if they would have been better off with him. I mean, I say that because he wouldn't be taking any chances. He's a young player now, and he would be coming in and he would just be getting that puck out of the zone. Just his job is to get the puck to the forwards, and I think that's what the Red Wings needed to do. And I think they're going to give him an opportunity to play next year. I mean, they give Sproul. Now they're not going to have 3 young players on the defense, and I think they're going to go out and try to get a veteran. But I think there's a real shot that they're going to turn over this defense.
Do you think that Licky still might be offered a contract, or do you think that the way that this has played out up till this point, that the Red Wings are looking for an overhaul, and if it is going to be a veteran defenseman, and hey, I'm going to say it again, that veteran defenseman would be someone like Dion Phaneuf or somebody of that ilk, someone who's a little bit younger and a little more physical. Kev? Hello, Kevin. Well,
yeah. Gotcha.
All right, Kevin,
okay.
Hear that?
You just froze up on me a little bit there.
Yes.
With regard to Zedlicki, I would say this. I think. Yeah, you still there?
Yes, I am. Yeah, we're having a little bit of a technical issue here, Kevin, freezing, but let's just wait it out. As soon as you can hear me, go right ahead and speak, and I'll shut up. So Kevin's a little bit frozen, but we're really looking at it. And to elaborate on my point is that, in a strange sense, if there was a false sense of security with how well the Red Wings had played and how they overachieved, I think that within that hierarchy of the Red Wings, when you look at Ken Holland and his minions, they realize what's going on, and I think that they're going to address some issues on this team. They have enough younger players that they're high on, and they have an abundance of young defensemen that, now they have to make the right choice, whom you move, and, the free agent class isn't that good. So, but I am really getting the distinct feeling that at the end of this year, regardless of how it plays out, unless the Red Wings really catch fire and win the Cup or something, that there are going to be some significant changes to this lineup. Kevin, are you back with us?
I am. Yeah, you were froze on me there for a while, but I am back. I know I caught the gist of it. I think most of you were asking about Zedlicki, who early on looked like he was one of the best acquisitions, and I think early on the thought was, boy, he has a chance to be a long-term fit here. But I think with the way the defense is played, particularly if they struggle and they don't do well in the playoffs, I think they're going to see an opportunity to really change this defense. And I don't think they're going to want to do it with a player his age. So, who knows? I mean, maybe as a one-year deal, they would still give him a chance to stay with the team. But I think more likely than not, they're going to have to look and see where these younger players can play. And, is Green going to be available? And would they still be interested in that? So I think if I had to guess, and that's all we're doing here, because much will depend on what they do down the stretch here. But I think they're going to turn this over with at least 3 defensemen, and I think 2 of them are going to be coming up from maybe even 3 coming up from Grand Rapids, and then maybe they'll add 1 either defenseman through a trade. I think this is where we start talking about Dion Phaneuf, or they add another veteran defenseman as well. But I just don't see them, sticking with the same group, not with the way they've played down the stretch here.
No, I don't either. And I love what you said, because I was thinking about Marchenko too. He would have played it safe. He wouldn't have turned the puck over or been reckless in his own end. First of all, he's not that kind of player, but essentially he wants to stay up here. I think that he would have played well within his limits, so much so that maybe the Red Wings would almost beg him to be a little more aggressive out there. But I don't think he was going to do that, and he has what seems to be an impressive shot. I am now under the impression, Kevin, that there is I'm getting a distinct vibe from people in the organization that Peter Mrazek's their #1 goalie. And I don't know if they're going to make any changes or issues or something with it over the offseason. I'm not saying they're going to trade Jimmy Howard, but if Mrazek isn't their #1 goalie at this point, there's going to be a battle for it next year, and the best guy win. And I'm under the impression that best guy is going to be Mrazek. And, pains me to say that, because Jimmy's competitive. I know he wants to win a Stanley Cup more than anything here in Detroit, and he is. He's really a fine, outstanding young man. But Mrazek, at this point, I think, has done enough in the mind of many in that organization that his time has come.
Yeah, and, I think there would be opportunities to move him. I mean, off the top of my head, San Jose will be looking for a goalie. Certainly Edmonton has been looking for a long time. The Buffalo Sabres will be looking for a goalie, and he is, from upstate New York, I believe. If they wanted to go in that direction, I think they probably would be able to move him. His price tag is not one that I think makes it so prohibitive to be able to move him. But I think I still, there's a long way to go. I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the postseason, because I'd like to remind everybody that Jimmy Howard was playing pretty well at the start of the season. Right. I know everybody's frustrated, but I think at some point here, everyone's going to take a step back, and they're going to see a couple of things. What they're going to see is that Howard was very good till he got hurt, and then he went bad, and then he had the yips on the in the shootout, and that's a concern. But before that time, he had been an average or just slightly above average in the shootouts. They're going to look at Mrazek, who has won a championship, who is very, very aggressive, but has had some downs to go with the ups this season. Like, even when he won a lot of those games, the Red Wings were doing a lot of scoring for him. There's a lot to like about him. I'm not suggesting for a minute that he's not an exceptional prospect, because he is. But he had some issues as well. I think he has given up some soft goals. I think he's given up some early goals. I think he's had to battle back after he's done that. Now, he's done all that. I think that's the impressive part of Mrazek, is when he does make a mistake, he usually comes right back and he performs at a high level. So I think once the emotion is taken out of this, that's when they'll make their decision. But I would be hesitant to say the Red Wings are leaning any way at this point. I would think that they may be thinking about the possibility that Mrazek's going to win the job, but I don't think they've made those decisions yet.
Kevin, let's look at Mike Babcock here. We offered our condolences on 2 shows ago about the passing of his father. Babs has been very public about it, actually, saying that he knew in the summertime that his dad was very, very ill, and that he has joined Mike's mother now. We certainly wish the Babcock family, as we said, the very, very best, and our thoughts and prayers are with them. But look, my mother died a little over 2 years ago. My father's been dead. It doesn't seem this long, but he died in October of 2000. We've lost parents, you and I know that. I am where can he be at this point? Because, you can be a great coach and you can be as disciplined as you want, but, he's got to have some feelings and emotions going through him right now. And I'm not saying that he can't coach the Red Wings or anything, but I know it's important to him, but I'm kind of thinking, that Babs needs maybe a little time to, go walk in the forest or something, Maybe I'm wrong in that you would think that the Red Wing team themselves could almost rally behind their coach. Am I too corny in thinking that, or?
Well, no. I mean, I think in these situations, that's why we always hear every year stories of the team rallying behind a guy who hasn't won. I think the Ottawa Senators, I just wrote about this the other day. When you list the reasons why the Senators are playing well, I think one of them is they're rallying behind Brian Murray, who is battling cancer, and I think they would like to do what they can to give him this kind of distraction, to let him have the opportunity with all that he's going through to have a little joy in his life by watching his team get in the playoffs when everybody said oh, there's no way. I mean, the Senators were 14 points back on February 10th, and they made a run. So, if what you're saying is everybody's looking at, Babcock now, I mean, I think all of that is possible. I think the hockey is a very emotional game. One thing I've noted about Babcock is whenever the situation is at its worst is when he does his best job. The year that the Red Wings were all beat up, and at one point even last year was a great season, but he's had other years too when they were all beat up, and I thought he's gotten them to play at a high level, and I think he's still got some magic left in him. I think that's why we're watching him say things like, I still see some good things. Like he's playing the good cop right now. Like he's not lambasting them in the paper, in the newspaper. He's saying, I'm seeing some good things. The guys are working hard. Like he knows that's the best way to get the best out of this team. So, I like how he's handled this. He has not called out Howard. He's been sort of he's done it, but he's done it in a very professional way. He's my number one goalie until he's not, and you can't criticize his communication. He's been right up front of how he's going to play his goalies. He doesn't play games with them. He doesn't, right after the game or shortly thereafter, he says, hey, this guy's starting the next game. So I think he's handled this well. But I would say this, with all that he's gone through this season, I think that will impact his decision this summer, because it has to. I mean, he's got to decide what's important in his life. And we all know the loss of a parent and hard times like he's had. I mean, that all impacts it. And you brought it up before, and I think it's a valid thought, which is, at some point, does he decide, well, maybe it's just time for a change, or maybe the Red Wings decide maybe it's time for the change. And the best example of that is just last summer. David Poile and Barry Trotz were close friends. Barry Trotz was a great coach. Everybody knows he was a great coach, and yet David Poile said to Barry, I think it's time for a change. Maybe we just ought to do something different. Maybe we get to that point. Maybe Mike Babcock thinks it's time for a change. Maybe the Red Wings think it's time for a change. I don't know that. And depending on what they do in the playoffs, maybe everybody will get excited again. But I think all of that is in play. Is my point. Like I don't think that this story is written yet. I don't think Mike Babcock knows what he's going to do. I don't think the Red Wings know what they're going to do. And I think what happens down the stretch will have an impact on that.
Well, from my standpoint, at the beginning of the season, I thought that he was gone. As the season progressed and this team, I guess now everyone's saying overachieved, but now where it's happened, also the loss of a parent, something that's cataclysmic in his life that happened like that, you're different. You're obviously different when, when your parents are gone. You rely on them and their experience, and they've always been there for you, and they're always going to be there in spirit. You'll think about them every day, and I certainly do. I understand all that, but now I'm not so sure, and I'm not saying just because his father passed away. Don't get me wrong, but I agree with you now. I am not so sure how this is going to play out. I would have told you up until 10 days ago that Babcock was coming back to Detroit. I'm now getting a feeling that this is really going to have to play out because Babcock's life is different now. and it'll be interesting to see exactly how. I don't think. Let's put it this way: I don't think he's going to go to Edmonton or anything. I don't think he wants to inherit that mess. But he could seriously make. I think it's a lot more serious now than it has been, if that makes any sense at all for him.
Yeah, I still believe, Art, that he's going to stay. I think when he starts adding up what's important to him, I still believe he's going to stay here. But I guess I just think the decision may become more difficult by all that's gone on in his personal life, and then even in his professional life. Like this Red Wings team, he's been here a long time, and he's watched these guys, and when you see this, maybe he's, at some point he says, well, maybe it's time for me to get a different sort of challenge. So we're all just speculating, and I think it's fair speculation because we've all watched Mike Babcock perform, and this is all, if you're Mike Babcock, very positive. I mean, one thing we know for sure is he's going to get a contract north of $4 million. So he's going to end up with a great situation. So it's not like we're wishing anything bad on him. This is all going to be good for him. But I think what we're seeing is that the stakes are changing here, and I think he still may get to the same place. But all this stuff has to play a factor.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, and certainly, regardless of what happens, it won't diminish. His price tag isn't going to go down. And the last several stories that have been written about this, and there haven't been many as of late because of the playoff races heating up and Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel. There's a lot of things that people love to write about and speculate right now in the NHL. Has been though that he realizes that his contract, what he settles for, is going to be the basis for everybody else for their contracts. That he has an opportunity here to not only elevate his pay significantly, but everybody else's pay, coach's pay, and that hasn't been lost on him. And he's a very loyal guy that way, and understands that. Kevin, I want to. You grew up in Big Ten country like me, and obviously I am not a big Michigan State fan, although I do admire Tom Izzo. But the Final Four is coming up, and I am just stunned and surprised that the Big Ten is not. They have two teams in the Final Four, Wisconsin and Michigan State, and the whole country is clamoring for a Kentucky-Duke matchup. Obviously, Kentucky would be undefeated, and Duke has Coach K. Is it me, Kevin? And I know it's, it was Good Friday. I even went to the services this afternoon. But, man, I am just hoping for a Big Ten final at this point. I mean, am I being too much of a curmudgeon? I mean, they just don't seem to get any respect. Or how do you see that? How do you think it's going to play out?
No.
I mean, we're going to do one on Monday again because obviously the Red Wings are going to play two games, and playoff picture could be completely cloudy or a little bit clearer on Monday, so we'll actually do the Red and White Authority episode 13 on Monday. But what Final Four? What's happened Saturday night?
Well, here's the thing: Madison Avenue people will weep openly if Duke and Kentucky do not, get into that final. Like, I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that millions of dollars are at stake here. Just in terms of the ratings would be different. I'm sure they would think about it, but obviously I'm a Big Ten guy, and that's how I think. I want it to come out. Although, God, I just don't see anybody beating Kentucky. I mean, it's like they have two teams of NBA players. I know it's only 8, or is it 9? I've lost track now. But I just think it would be a great. If we ended up not seeing the Kentucky-Duke matchup and some Big Ten boys, it would certainly be a lot of fun. I actually think it would be interesting. I think people would tune in to see these teams that somehow toppled the Giants.
Well, I watched Charlie Rose last night. He had Jay Billis on, who is a big Coach K guy, and I think that Charlie Rose graduated from Duke as well. And they were talking, and how do you see Saturday's game? Well, let's get to if Kentucky and Duke, let's break down that game, and that was like basically the whole segment. But Jay Billis said something that was interesting. we know that the highest-rated college basketball game of all time was Magic versus Bird, Indiana State versus Michigan State, when Michigan State won the national title.
Right.
That's the #1 rated game. Billis went as far as to say if Kentucky and Duke play Monday night, that he believes that will break that record.
That's wild.
Because people who've not heard of Kentucky, because they're undefeated, obviously, they're going to go to be 40-0, that it's like people who watch the Super Bowl. They just watch it because it is such an event that the hype for that game will be so much that the entire country will tune into it.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with that because it is the lure of the 40-0 season. Yeah, and the fact that that the hype of this team, that it's just a collection of guys who should be in the NBA, who are so good. It's almost like Duke is an afterthought, and that's amazing given Duke's history and reputation and draw of its own. But it's all about Kentucky and this team and this everybody kind of want to see that. But it's hard to ever compete with those old numbers because that was a non-cable era and so many options now for television. It's hard to to deal with those kind of numbers. So I would still be shocked if those numbers don't hold up just because of the way television is now.
Well, right. For me, I mean, I've got picture-in-picture, and I'm going to be watching The Voice and Dancing with the Stars, so I'm not going to watch it. Man, boy, could you? That's not going to happen. Just let me say that. Kevin, one final question. It's been bothering me. Today, is Good Friday, and I didn't know. I said to a couple of people, "Hey, Happy Good Friday," and they said, "This is nothing to be happy about. Good Friday, you shouldn't be happy." I'm kind of wondering, am I missing something here? I mean, do you say anything to anybody on Good Friday? I mean, do you just kind of not say nothing,
No,
I mean, I guess you say Happy Easter, right? But that's about it.
Yeah. Well, it's a Good Friday for me. I've driven to Chicago. All my family will be here at my son and his wife's house. So it's a good day for me. That's for sure.
Well, have a happy Good Friday then, Kevin. All right.
All right.
All right. We'll see you Monday. Obviously the Red Wings need at least. We're looking at 3 points this weekend.
But I think they really need 3, and I think that's doable. I really do. I mean, I think you got to squeeze 1 out of Minnesota, and I just think that's plausible. Just the way the setup is. The Red Wings are capable of hanging with anybody. So I think they could squeeze 1 out, and then they got to beat Washington. It's that simple.
All right. Well, we'll see you. Enjoy. Have a happy Easter with your family in Chicago, Kevin. We will do this again on Monday, as the Red Wings will only have 3 games left: 2 against the Hurricanes and 1 against the Canadiens, and we'll see where they're at. So for Kevin Allen, I'm Art Regner. This is the Red and White Authority, and we'll see you on Monday. If you celebrate, happy Easter, happy Passover, just have a happy day. All right. We'll talk to you soon. See you. Bye-bye.